Here's the good news after Oregon lost to Indiana.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it's that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you all so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. Talk about Oregon's game plan against Indiana, where it went wrong. More thoughts on Will Stein and a little trivia today because I think we could all use a little distraction from the thought of Oregon football, which, as I said, I think they're going to be just fine. This episode brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. The good news coming out of this game against Indiana is twofold. Number one, Dan Lanning will have something to motivate his players with. I expect them to come out and will be severely disappointed if they don't against Rutgers, metaphorically, with their hair on fire and a game plan ready to go and beat the Scarlet Knights soundly over in Piscataway, New Jersey. If any of you get to go to that game, hey, congratulations, the move to the Big Ten's paying off for you. Good news number two for the Ducks, I don't think they have to win out to make the college football playoff. I don't. Is it a weak schedule by Big Ten standards? Kinda. As the year is progressing, though, I think as long as they wind up at 10-2, 9-3 will not get them into the college football playoff. Of that, I am fairly confident. But if they wind up going 10-2, they will have won at Iowa, who's not great, but not awful. They beat Wisconsin soundly. Oregon's next two opponents are not good. I don't believe there's a Big Ten win between the next two teams that Oregon will play. There's not. Rutgers has lost 38-28 to Iowa, 31-28 at Minnesota, and 38-19 at Washington. They had that game close at the half. But Wisconsin has been a complete and utter mess. But once Oregon goes on the bye week and comes out of it, you're going to have four games that they might not all be huge resume boosters, the first two in particular. The last two, however, if you go 10-2, you are winning at least one of USC and at Washington. There is a very real possibility one of those teams are ranked. What Oregon is going to benefit, I believe, in this scenario, is from their preseason ranking. Some people don't like those. Too bad. They're a reflection of what you did the year before and in the offseason, and brand bias as well. I think Oregon has both of those things working in its favor. So as long as they win those games and don't majorly struggle with a Rutgers or a Wisconsin, then I think they will be just fine getting inside the top 12 to make the college football playoff. Because remember, there is just the straight seeding. The only bid stealer that exists in college football will be the group of five champion. It could be a South Florida. It could be Tulane. It could be Memphis. That'll be the only school ranked outside of the top 12 in all likelihood that winds up making the college football playoff. Everybody else probably going to be already in that range. But Oregon fell in the AP poll, which is different than the College Football Playoff Committee's rankings, which haven't yet come out. There's rarely a major difference between the two. But Oregon's sitting there at 5-1 and going from number 2 in the cut, 2 or 3, I think they were 3 going into that game against Indiana, from 3 down to number 8 with a home loss to what we know now is a really good Indiana team. And I thought they were good going into it, but they looked really, really good on Saturday. The more I watch the game back, the more I think, yeah, Indiana was just really good. Oregon sitting there at number 8, they'd have to do a lot wrong over the second half of the season, which is what we're now entering, 6 games into it, to not make the college football playoff. Because if they play against inferior opponents the way they have looked previously, we know that the committee or AP voters have been willing to give Oregon credit for that. And last year, by the way, you think about Indiana, who was fighting against brand bias in a significant way. When 11-1, they did not have a big-time win. They had a couple of okay wins, but mostly they just beat bad teams really soundly. And then they went to Ohio State, and they were the second best team on the field, and they got into the college football playoff. Oregon's schedule this year is tougher than what Indiana's schedule was last year in the Big Ten. So I believe at 10-2, Oregon will wind up in the college football playoff. So that's the good news. That's me. Captain Optimism has returned for today's show. I want to share a couple more thoughts on Will Stein, and there's a question later on the show about him as well. Amongst Oregon fans, he is a popular topic at the moment. I get that. I've talked about him on the show. He was not good on Saturday. 13 points for the offense. A touchdown with 5:10 to go in the first quarter and no touchdowns after that. I don't care who you're playing. That's not okay. Not okay. I'm not calling for his job, but one thing that was lacking in the Indiana game that was there in the Penn State game was the second half resurgence and clear adjustments on display. Obviously, the game plan and early execution that Oregon's offense wanted to have in the first half wasn't there. But Oregon had more points at the half. They had a touchdown against Indiana in the first half. Didn't have that against Penn State. But the biggest difference, because plenty of people are throwing stuff out about, Oregon's offense the last two games, and they've played two legit defenses with really good defensive coordinators, and it can be tougher to score points in those spots. Do I think Oregon's offense has another gear, even against that caliber of an opponent? Yes, of course they do. Of course they do. And I think they can continue to progress as Dante Moore gets better as well. But in the first half of the Penn State game, the results weren't there, but the process looked good. Oregon was moving the ball up and down the field. There was a missed field goal. They missed a fourth down that I was okay with them going for. They actually executed a couple of big fourth downs. But then in the second half, Will Stein had the adjustments made. And they went out and scored 2 touchdowns. That's the biggest thing. If you come out in a game plan of what you want to do and the plays you want to run, on script for your first offensive drive, when that doesn't work, you got to be able to counter in game and figure out how to put points on the board. And Oregon simply wasn't able to do that as this game progressed. I think that was his biggest sin on Saturday, the lack of adjustments that came in the second half. Because I never felt like Oregon was going to score a bunch of points. And by the way, Ducks wound up with 30 because they were able to execute on a couple of overtime drives, granted short field, but still, the offense in the second half against Penn State came alive. And there was a part of me, I wasn't happy with how Oregon played in the first half, but there was a part of me that wasn't that worried about the second half because I thought, well, go into halftime, figure out how you're going to attack the defense, talk a couple of things through with Dante Moore, and go out and play a better second half, just like you did against Penn State. The defense came out, set the tone, and then the offense just laid an egg. They had a bad day. They got out-schemed. They got out-coached. It happens. It's frustrating. It's certainly frustrating. But great coordinators have bad days. Jim Knowles, can we agree he's a great defensive coordinator? Can we agree he's good? He was pretty darn good last year. He had a bad day 2 weeks ago, and his head coach doesn't have a job anymore. UCLA put 42 on the Penn State defense. Bad day. The key is to not let one bad day become 2. My high school golf coach always used to, talk to us guys that were not as good as the top guys on the team. And one thing I remember him telling about us was, hey, when they get out of position, look how infrequently they make double bogeys. They get out, they drive the ball into the woods. They make a 5, they go get it back later. But they avoid the big blow up. That's what Will Stein's going to do. Made a bogey on Saturday. You're going to make those. Make an adjustment going forward. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Hit me up on Twitter. All of that good stuff. The game plan. What is a game plan? One of you asked that question. More thoughts on that. We're still getting through the Indiana thing. I do believe it will be okay. First, this episode brought to you by Wayfair. The holidays are going to be here before you know it, which is exciting, but getting your home ready for guests and celebrations can feel like a lot. Maybe your serveware needs a refresh, or the guest room could use new bedding. Wayfair has everything you need to get your home holiday ready. From Christmas trees and wreaths to bedding, cookware, and outdoor inflatables, it's your one-stop shop for every room in the house. Wayfair makes it easy to personalize your home for the holidays with a huge selection for every style and budget. And with free and easy delivery, even on the big stuff, you can get everything you need without the hassle of huge delivery fees. Do you want to be able to throw that perfect holiday party? Wayfair's got what you need to make your home look perfect. Get organized, refreshed, and ready for the holidays for way less. Head to wayfair.com right now to shop all things home. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. This episode also brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. The NFL season's here. FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. You pick a bet, you put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. It's great. It is a great opportunity for you out there if you think you know what's going to happen. Do you think Oregon's going to just come out in revenge mode against Rutgers this week and lay it on the Terrapins? Well, Oregon's favored by around 17 points, 17.5 last I looked, according to our friends at FanDuel. If you think Oregon's winning this game 38-10, well, you know what to do. You go check out FanDuel. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com, download the FanDuel app today and get started. FanDuel.com, check them out at FanDuel.com. You can't see it through the cup on YouTube, but I do have my blue mystery liquid in there because the Mariners are up 2-0 on the Blue Jays. All right, anyway, back to Oregon here. This is an Oregon Ducks podcast, I believe. If I started talking about the Mariners for 30 minutes and how happy it makes me to see them having a great season right now that I hope continues, I think that would be a dereliction of duty. So let's talk about Oregon's game plan from Saturday. What exactly does that mean? That's what one of you asked me. What's the definition of a game plan? This is a good question because Dan Lanning said in his post-game press conference remarks that, I didn't feel like we had a great plan going into it. He also had a quote out there that he thought they should have run the ball more in the second half, which is a difficult back and forth for a head coach that is not a play caller on either side of the ball, particularly on offense when he's a former defensive guy, because the dynamic between a head coach and an offensive coordinator involves a lot of game planning going into the week, but you can start to cause your OC to second guess himself or not let him, run his system the way that he wants to. If as a head coach, you start to be overly anxious or overly controlling on the headset. That's not to say from time to time, Dan Lanning isn't telling Will Stein, hey, let's run the ball here. Hey, look for that. Hey, they're rolling to a too high safety look all the time. Let's get some underneath throw. Hey, they're one-on-one on the outside. That stuff is indeed going to happen. But the question of what exactly is a game plan is the way that you want a game to look as a head coach. So, for example, I've seen this a lot with Southern Utah games over the years. If you're a team that is really pass heavy, when you're looking at what another team brings on film, you might see some weaknesses, this here, that there, the way they rotate their linebackers or anything like that, and you might see that as exploitable. And you might be a really pass-heavy team, but you might come out and actually want to run the ball a lot. That's not something that the other side thinks you're going to do. They're getting ready for the pass. They're getting ready for pass. And all of a sudden, you're going to work in a couple new plays. You're going to work in run concepts. You're going to run the ball 60% of the time on your opening drive just to make them think about it. Those are the sorts of game planning and opening script sorts of discussions that coaching staffs have amongst themselves. And we've seen some of this on Ducks versus them over the years as well. You go back to the Ohio State game a year ago. Lanning has a moment where they're in a coaches meeting and he says, hey, in a big spot, I want to go to guys that I trust. I want to go to our playmakers. I want Jordan James running behind Josh Connerly. What did they do? 3rd down and 6 on the drive that ultimately gave Oregon the lead on offense. They called a pitch play, Josh Connerly leading the way for Jordan James. So those are the sorts of things, and there's a lot. There's a lot that goes into it. But every coach is looking at film, and there are a lot of conversations that go on throughout the week about, hey, what's our plan? The head coach might see something defensively and say, hey, they like to play a lot of quarters coverage. And he'll go to his offense coordinator. How are we attacking that this week? And they'll talk things through and bounce ideas off of one another. But then when it comes to calling the actual plays during the game, obviously that falls on the offense coordinator. So I hope that answers your question of like what exactly is a game plan, how you want the game to go, what you want it to look like to result in you having a win. Another good example, go back to that Ohio State game last year. Oregon's game plan countered that of Ohio State. Ohio State's defensive game plan was, hey, they throw the ball short a lot. They do a lot of short and intermediate passes. We're going to load up against that. And Oregon, maybe it wasn't so much game plan as an in-game adjustment, but they clearly had the idea of we're going to take shots over the top. Then they went into the Rose Bowl with that same sort of game plan. Hey, we want to be consistent, push the ball down the field. Ohio State was ready for it, and Oregon didn't have good enough counters. That's the chess match. That's the chess match that happens every Saturday in college football and the NFL all over the country. Hey, we want to make sure we get so-and-so this many touches throughout the game. Hey, we're going to use this guy a little bit less. We don't feel like the plays that we've run to him, this could be something that came up with D.R. Hill maybe, we don't feel like those plays are going to work as well against this team, so we're not going to run them quite as often. Those are the sorts of game planning moments that a staff will do in a collaborative fashion throughout the course of the week. How much freedom do I want to give our quarterback at the line of scrimmage? What's our run-pass balance going to be? All that sort of stuff. That's what a game plan. Dan Lanning didn't feel like it was good enough going into the game. Maybe that's just coach speak. Or maybe it wasn't good enough. A couple questions here. Speaking of the coaching staff, Dan Lanning doesn't have, this is for Spencer Scale of Agreement. Dan Lanning doesn't have a big game problem, but he has a bye week problem. I mean, Oregon hasn't had phenomenal games off byes. The Rose Bowl, this one, there's a game a couple of years ago, but Oregon was also off a bye last year against Washington and beat them 49-21. So, yeah, I don't know that it's a 3. That's a 3. Another one, Spencer, here's an SSA. Way too many Oregon fans are overreacting to the Indiana game. This was definitely a disappointing loss, but many talked all offseason that playing Penn State and then Indiana after was going to be tough. Mendoza really has grown, and his game showed that Moore still has some growth, and Stein still has a lot to learn, do better still has to learn to do better in-game adjustments. Yeah, I've said most of that throughout the week. I don't want to lump every Oregon fan into those that express a lot of frustration online. But, yeah, that's a 9.5 on Spencer's scale of agreement. Like, I go back and listen to my reaction show if you haven't. I was disappointed. I was frustrated. It was a terrible game to watch. I really do think Oregon's going to be okay. The last time they lost a regular season game, and by the way, they lost one at home in 2014 when they went to the national championship game. I know that was Mark Helfrich's staff, but still, one loss doesn't have to mean it's all doom and gloom going forward. The last time Dan Lanning lost a regular season game, they won their next 6, and they played really well. Let me pull up the scores real quick. There can be an element of focus that kicks in. So they lost to Washington in October a couple years ago. That was on the road. They beat Washington State 38-24. Cougars had a late touchdown in that one. They won at number 13 Utah on game day 35-6. They beat Cal 63-19, USC 36-27. It wasn't that close. ASU 49-13 and 16th ranked Oregon State 31-7. I think Oregon will be okay. So yeah, 9.5. 9.5. That's a big one. That's a big number on Spencer's scale of agreement. There are more such takes that I shall evaluate to wrap today's show. First, this episode brought to you by Game Time. College football is back. We all love it. The tailgates, rivalries, the energy in the stands, there's nothing like it. But let's be real. Actually getting tickets can feel like more of a battle than the game itself. Endless queues, hidden fees, prices jumping at checkout. That is why I use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. And it's not just for college football. If you want to go to the game in Piscataway, you can find tickets on Game Time. But just last week, I found tickets to John Mulaney down in Las Vegas. I got a great deal compared to the other seats in the section where I wound up sitting. Saved hundreds of dollars for 2 tickets. Did not have any surprise fees to check out. Ticket was on my phone in minutes from when I placed the order. Had no issues. Had a great time. John Mulaney, hilarious. Game Time made that happen. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets. With Game Time, download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, it's promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. It is that simple. Download Game Time today. All right, lots of thoughts on Indiana here. Gavin says, hey, Spencer, I've rewatched the Indiana game a couple of times now. Dedication, I love that. And I just can't get past how poor the play calling was from Will Stein. I fully agree. I genuinely don't think he's the coach people have made him out to be. Every time he faces a defense with equivalent talent or a strong coordinator, the offense seems to stall. Even in the Penn State game, many of the explosive plays came from more improvising rather than anything drawn up. I saw similar trends with Bo Nix against Washington in the Pac-12 championship and Dylan Gabriel against Ohio State, talented quarterbacks bailing out the system. Okay. In the Indiana game, we were averaging 5.5 yards a carry, but only ran the ball 21 times. That's a major red flag. On top of that, good long question here. Stein continues to call plays that only attack the perimeter, ignoring the middle of the field and limiting easy high percentage throws. Okay, this goes on, but I get where you're going for here. So, recency bias is a very powerful drug. I get why after the Penn State and Indiana games, you feel this way, but are we just going to ignore that the previous conversation surrounding an Oregon coordinator in big games was about questions with Tosh Lupoy, not Will Stein? Because if you look at Will Stein's record in games with comparable talent, well, 2023 Washington is up there, over 30 points both times. Didn't get off to a great start, I agree, but made adjustments. Oregon came back and took the lead. Defense could not get a stop and gave up way too many points. How about the Big Ten championship game last year? Does that not count? Are we just writing that one off as, it was Penn State? Because they came out and scored on, what was it, each of their first 3-4 drives? Like, there is no coordinator that is perfect. The last time Georgia won a national championship, their game against Ohio State, pretty sure it was a 42-41 final. Double check that real quick. Yeah, 42-41 final in December of 2022. Okay, the year after Lanning left. Did Georgia forget how to play defense? Were they not actually good? Sometimes another staff that has a lot of talent puts together a game plan and that side of the ball just cannot quite figure it out. That's football. That's competition. But I have seen Will Stein, heck, the Utah game from 2023 is a darn good Utah defense, and Oregon walked into Rice Eccles, put up 35 points. So, yeah, the last two haven't been great. I think the second half against Penn State was really good from Will Stein. First half, not quite as good. So overall, you'd give that, B-, B. And on Saturday, D-. Absolutely. But no, I don't think that, because of Saturday, Will Stein is no longer an offensive coordinator that can lead Oregon to where they want to go. So that's a 1.5. Another one, SSA take, or several for you. From the start, this game felt like Oregon falling into the pressure of being a top team in the country. Often it was as though the offense, are you trying to give me tongue twisters? Dante Moore was playing to not lose the game. Such a young team is not used to getting everyone's best shot every game, and as such, this should serve as a huge learning opportunity which catapults them into being the team they want to be. Pressure of another undefeated season eases off, and there can be a stronger focus on executing and improving. Yeah, one reason that I picked Oregon to go 11-1 before the season is what we saw on Saturday. I thought it would be against Penn State, not Indiana, but you've got a quarterback who's going to make some mistakes, and he had his worst game as a Duck by far on Saturday. It was not particularly close. Like all the other ones, Penn State included, were just light years above what happened on Saturday. Credit Indiana's defensive staff. They were really, really good. But yeah, like coming into this season, a lot of people said, Oregon's going to go 12-0. They're going to beat Penn State. Well, they did beat Penn State, and obviously they're not going 12-0. But this is what happens when you have a young team, particularly young quarterback. There are going to be some mistakes made. There's going to be a learning process. There's going to be some growth. Now, I still believe the potential of this team is slightly above where I had it pegged before the season. But, you know, as time has gone on, I have gotten calmer and calmer about the game on Saturday. And yeah, I was frustrated with it. I hate losing at home. Cannot stand it. Not a fun thing to watch. Drives me insane. Should not have happened, but Indiana was a better team that day. But could it be a good thing? Sure. It was in 2023. And that was a far more heartbreaking loss, by the way, than Indiana. So to your point, you know, Penn State having their hearts broken and then playing into James Franklin getting fired, you know, that was, I think that's more difficult to overcome, frankly, than what Oregon has to do here, which is, okay, we have to get better. Well, you stay hungry, put a chip on your shoulder. So playing that, I mean, all in all, from that particular take, I'll give that a 7. Yeah, I think it's a solid 7. Let's end on the lighter side, shall we? A lot of negative stuff. What's going to happen after a loss? We've got a lot of things to criticize and such, but let's end with some Tuesday trivia today. I got it right last week. Nailed it right on the head. Sharp as a tack. About which team has the most quarterbacks starting in the NFL. That was Oregon, who's second/third, Alabama, Oklahoma, depending on the Jalen Hurts situation. But yeah, I got that one right. So at least there was that. Here is another one that is, shall we say, relevant to this was asked before the game on Saturday. But Oregon has played Indiana 3 times in football. When was the last time we played and what was the score? Okay. Jeff Schwartz was on the team. I remember seeing him tweet about it. I believe it was 2000. It's either 7. It's like 6, 7, 8. It was not 9. I don't know that it was. I'm gonna go 2007, and I think Oregon lost the game 27-20 is the guess for my score. So there you go. We end on the lighter side today. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Until then, hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.